Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our CC Canada speaker series featuring Anthea Sargeaunt. Anthea Sargeaunt, incredible lady based out of Edmonton. She is the CEO of 2S Water. As an individual, serial entrepreneur, I believe she's now in her third business, an award-winning entrepreneur, so recognized both locally and regionally and beyond. And a mother too. So I think it's incredible what Anthea has been building with 2S Water, juggling her personal and professional responsibilities over the last several years. Perhaps I can start, Anthea, by introducing and telling a little bit about 2S Water. So 2S Water is a very innovative firm, and it's really breaking new ground in terms of sustainable development. Obviously, sustainable development is a very important subject. More and more for Canadian business owners today and certainly tomorrow. And 2S has developed the world's first sensor for detecting water quality and purity in real time. Recently, the company was selected as one of the top 100 best water innovations worldwide, and also being awarded a ConvergeX pre-commercialization award for the best new technology, because there's a lot of practical applications with regards to water treatment, as you can imagine, across various industries. And Anthea, as an individual, I believe, was voted Startup Alberta's most promising entrepreneur in 2019. So delighted to have you on this morning with us, Anthea, and thank you very much for taking the time. Welcome.
Thank you. It was like you were describing someone else that I'd really like to meet that person. That's great.
Well, you're very humble. Well, perhaps just to kick us off, you can tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of how you came to start the business.
Sure. Yeah. So we founded 2S Water on a mission. We want to protect the world's water with real-time data, and as we started addressing this challenge, we realized there was a big gap. Nobody can detect metals in water in real time. There isn't an existing technology that can do this. Right now, you have to take it to a lab, or you have to build a lab in-house. So it's either a huge time delay or a massive expense. That's how we get incidents like Flint, Michigan, where the population are drinking lead, because there's no actual real-time detection method. So we spent the last 2 years in R&D developing a technology that can do just this. And it's actually very important, not just for municipal applications where lead, arsenic, mercury are all concerns, but also industrially. If you look at a major boiler that's running in a facility, if you get metals coming into that, they scale on the inside. In some oil and gas facilities, that can cost them $10,000 a day in increased fuel costs and all the associated GHG emissions. So very important stuff. We also have lots of applications in mining where, of course, they are very concerned about the metals in the water. So we've been doing this for the last 2 years. We're about to go to market now. Of course, a great time to be about to go to market when the whole world shuts down around you. So we've learned a lot of lessons, and we've applied a lot of the startup thinking that we have in-house to surviving through this crisis. And I think there's some really important lessons about, agility and innovation and collaboration and the value of mission that we all need to adapt as businesses to make it through and survive and thrive post-COVID.
Absolutely, and I love the social responsibility angle to what you're doing. I think it's incredibly relevant today, not just in industry, of course, but in society. You mentioned the pandemic and the current crisis we're in. What have you been doing, and what have you done to survive and thrive during this time?
So we made a lot of changes. The first was we were already a somewhat remote team. We have offices across Edmonton as well as in Victoria. And we changed the way we were handling our remote communication. So we really embraced this remote lifestyle. So we have socials remotely. We have all our team meetings remotely. And we think it's going to be a major competitive advantage to us over time because our market is spread out. We have no intentions of going back to brick and mortar everywhere that we can avoid it. In the future, that's going to be overheads that other businesses don't have and put you at a competitive disadvantage. So that's been one of the big things, is really adapting to this remote culture, embracing it, seeing it as the ongoing future. We've also had to have a lot of agility when it comes to our market. In my intro there, I mentioned oil and gas. We've done a lot of research. We've made a lot of contacts into the oil and gas industry. Guess who stopped answering the calls when COVID hit? They are not happy campers in that industry, and they're not going to be spending on R&D in the next little bit here. So we had to be very agile about our markets and about our market considerations. And I think that's something that every business is going to see right now. The people who were your customers before may not be your customers going forward. And if we don't move as businesses to address that and to identify our new markets and to start appealing to them, then we're going to get left behind. So we did that by reaching out through our network, a large part of which is corporate connections, and explaining what we wanted to do, usually using, as you said, David, that social mission of, we have a mission to protect the world's water, and we want you to help us spread it and connect us to other people who share this mission. And that has resonated so incredibly well. And that's given us the data and the information that we need. We are now looking at addressing the pulp and paper market instead of oil and gas, because everybody is still buying toilet paper in apparently large volumes. So.
but again, I think what's interesting, one of the things interesting about you've done is really, this isn't your first business, but clearly you using startup methodologies to find out more about how your customers are doing, how your clients are doing. And I think that's incredibly relevant to others that are listening on this call as well. Is there anything?
Sorry, we really gone back to the basics on that and just embraced absolute basic customer discovery skills that we were using before we started the business to assess our markets, and just taking it right back to the bottom level and treating it like new markets. And that has been invaluable for us, because in many ways, these are new markets. They're not behaving like the old markets behaved anymore. And if we don't understand the change in behavior, then we're not going to be able to address our clients' needs properly.
100%. You also talked about, the social element of what it is you do, your mission to protect the world's water. How have you seen that becoming more important today with regards to driving the business forward?
Actually, we found a really pivotal change in how people are responding to that, both on the partnership side and on the client side. We weren't confident about going into historically environmentally susceptible industries and saying we were only there to improve the mission, and if we could not improve their water quality, if that's not what we were being applied for, we didn't want to work with them. But that's what we did, because at this point, if you don't have a mission, then what are you doing? And the response that we got on the client side was fantastic. People in entrenched conservative industries responded to this with passion. They wanted the same things we did. In general, people now are embracing social mission as a big driving force. And, it's a really easy to tell now who's being authentic about it and who isn't. I keep thinking back to right when COVID hit and all the companies released their new COVID commercials. And I think the car companies were the absolute worst, because they'd have this great message: we're all in this together. We understand you're probably unemployed, sitting at home with no money. Please go buy a truck. Just didn't resonate with the messaging. And I feel like a lot of those companies lost a lot of market share behaving that way. If we're not honest and clear about our message right now, it's really coming through quickly, to the point where we had a conversation last week where we'd met a connection, basically through LinkedIn. It was pretty blind. We opened the conversation with our mission, with what we wanted to do. And they responded to it so emphatically that although they are not a natural match, they want to go into partnership with us now, because we share a mission. And that's a response that I wasn't seeing pre-COVID, of people being willing to choose the direction that their business is traveling based upon alignment in a social vision. So for the people listening on the call, finding your mission and expressing your mission, I feel like 6 months ago, these were things we did in our boardroom. And then, the very typical, we stick them up on the wall, maybe we send them out in company newsletters. I'm seeing the advantage right now in living and breathing that every single day, every single interaction, because that's the authenticity that people need right now.
And it becomes a basis for decision making based upon what you're saying, both on the client side and on the partnership side.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're seeing right now.
So again, clearly we're talking about a company that's a couple of years old now, but I know based upon your experience, Your experience is far, far broader and deeper than that. So I guess the question would be, this is fine if I've got a startup business, but what about, more established businesses where culture and mindset may be more entrenched? How can someone listening to this call as a business owner relate and apply this in their business, do you think?
Yeah, and I think that's the really important challenge that we're facing right now, because companies that don't adapt quickly are going to be left behind. We're seeing a dramatic change in customer behavior and in customer actions, and driven by a pivotal social scenario that's pushing all this. So we absolutely need to adapt, and adapt quickly. And that's what startups are all about. So right now, there is an acceptance in our employees for change that there has never been. They're all in a different scenario than they were in 3 months ago. As business leaders, we have an opportunity to make that a long-term cultural change. Alternatively, if we ignore it, it will go away, and change management will once again become a very difficult process. We need to think about how we can move with agility to address these new customer needs. The way that we do it in our company, which I think is a way that many startups do it, is with an agile process. So, we're making small teams to address single problems. We're giving them authority to make decisions. We try to make them cross silo so that you had a good perspective on how the company's going. And then we implement them in sprints. For anybody who was on the call yesterday, as Jesse was saying, take a change, try it, test it out, then reiterate while changing and adapting to make sure that you get your prime market, your prime model out into the market. That kind of fast iteration is possible right now. And bringing in that kind of culture right now, there's an opportunity to do that while people are already in a shifting culture. And by implementing that now, we can maintain and continue a culture of change that will allow people to be adaptive. Because many people are thinking that this change that's happening right now isn't the final form of what we're going to see. And we don't expect to see the final form for quite some time. So companies are going to need to continue to be adaptive to adopt a long-term culture of adaptability and change.
Yeah, so and I think it's an interesting point. Now is an opportunity to affect rapid change internally in our organizations, with our company cultures, across our employees, and it's an interesting example you used. I mean, I'm just thinking about a personal example of one of the large Canadian banks that actually realized that it took them far too long to actually roll out new initiatives, and implemented a very, very, very small scale, rapid task force essentially to prototype new initiatives, new ideas to their clients. And as you say, using that as an iteration to move forward and scale it across the organization. So I think it's really interesting. What can I do? What can someone listening to this call do today in terms of starting the ball rolling, starting the process, do you feel?
I think the most important thing you need to do today is talk to your clients and find out what's changing in their world. Talk to enough of them that you have a cohesive picture of what's changing, and that you can pick out trends and patterns, and then start looking at how you want to implement that into change in your own organization. Mm-hmm. By creating this culture of change, you can adapt and take advantage of the market changes that are happening right now. I think the one caveat that I really want to add to that is that it's very difficult when our teams are remote to have enough communication. In addition, it's also very difficult to have enough communication when you're going through a change process. So these two things can combine into an environment that's not going to make your employees feel like they're a part of the change, like they're comfortable with the change. Over communication with your employees, with your internal stakeholders, is vital right now. The people that are establishing ways that you can communicate with them remotely. You can't be calling your employees every 15 minutes. That's going to make them think they're in trouble and you're in trouble. You have to find ways to make it established to be part of the culture going forward, that communication when you're not in the office, and there's a high chance you won't be back in the office for a long time, or maybe ever. there's an opportunity to create decentralized companies here that we can take advantage of, especially those of us like Bob on the call, who has a company that stretches across a huge geographic area. Learning and properly adapting how to be a decentralized company is going to be a huge competitive advantage going forward.
What you're talking about essentially is agility. It's having the agility to move fast and pivot fast in any environment, essentially. Do you have any ideas or things that are working for you with regards to creating that decentralized decision making? I guess within larger organizations, things that you've seen and done that have worked in the past that could be potentially applicable to people listening.
So what we've tried to do inside our own organization is two things: create wide open communication lines that everybody can step into, and make them as egalitarian as possible. I need everybody in my company to be willing to come forward with anything. When you're adapting change quickly, sometimes the guy at the bottom is the guy who has the bit of information that you need. And if he's not comfortable coming forward in some kind of digital way to speak to you, because you're not going to be walking into his office and looking him in the eye, then you're going to have a big issue going forward. Clear lines of communication, clear, empowered people, so that guy who knows about the problem can then take action to prevent it from recurring.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I know we also talked about the concept of sprint changes, slightly different verbiage. What have you been doing in terms of things that are working with regards to making things happen now faster and in a more sort of sustainable, impactful way?
Yeah, and we have been adapting a lot of that sprint ideology. There's actually a really great book called Sprint, which describes a process of how to implement a design change on a product in 1 week, all the way from coming up with the idea to testing it on clients. It's a great little book if you want to pick up something fun on this topic. And that's kind of the methodology that we follow. Obviously, we're hardware, so we're not rolling out anything in 1 week. But we're getting a lot of customer feedback all the time that we can on what they need, on what's important. So we're not developing features that have no purpose. Like a stripped down MVP concept, minimum viable product concept, is vital for every single change. Do it to the basic minimum. And that can be very, very tough for us business people, because we want to be perfectionists. We want to do everything right. You send that brochure back for editing 27 times until it's perfect. But that's not how you can behave in a fast agility environment. You're looking for the Pareto rule, 80% with 20% of the effort. Get out something, test it on those few fanatic clients that love your product and love what you do and are willing to take a little variance and take a little bit of a risk with you. Get their feedback and iterate again. It's the speed requires a lack of precision that is unnatural to most of us.
So there's a learning process there as well, I think. And I guess the word I'm looking for is, confidence in a way that even if it's not perfect, it's going to be effective short term and longer term.
And trust as well. You have to trust that those people you're taking it to aren't going to walk away because you've handed them something incomplete. And you got to know your client base well enough to know who those people are who will accept that. So a big trust part of that, but clients respond to that. They want to be the trusted person that you go to. Everybody likes to be your confidant. So it's people need to take that risk and learn to trust and to ask both their clients for help and the community. We have a great group of people in Corporate Connections. I've learned a lot of this from my confederates in Edmonton, that, I trust them to give me good advice, to lead me in the right direction. That's part of the power of this network that we have here. And in turn, I turn that trust to my clients and to the people that want my product, and they respond with equal fervor to that sentiment, I think.
So what are some of the things, I guess, in terms of, ways in which you've been able to leverage your network, whether it be inside or outside of Corporate Connections, to actually make a difference? And what have you learned, I guess would be the question. on the back of that with regards to the importance of relationships and network as it pertains to business.
And networking has kind of been a pivotal changing thing as over the last few months as well. It's required developing a really different skill set personally. A willingness to jump on calls with complete strangers. I'm sure half the people in the audience today met me that way because I sent them a message saying, I want to talk to you. I have no idea who you are, but we share a network. Let's become friends. And people respond to that very well. That's an attitude I learned from Corporate Connections, but I've taken it elsewhere. I take that into almost every interaction that I go into, and people respond incredibly well to it. It is difficult for them to reach out as much as it is for us. And most people are home alone right now. They don't have that steady interaction. So people are happy to respond right now. People are happy to network. And there is a feeling developing in the established business community that I used to see a lot in the startup community, but is starting to transition through, that we can support and we can encourage. And that's kind of the rising tide lifts all boats attitude is appearing more and more and more in established business. We want to help each other for no reason other than to help each other. And going out there with that attitude of it is okay for me to ask for help. It is okay for me to put out a general request. I am trying to meet people in this industry. I don't understand it and I want to. People respond to that. It's also okay to go into a meeting asking how you can help and finding that way. And that deep interconnection, people are responding very well to it. That's how we're finding the people who are willing to adapt and change and thrive in this new economy.
I think it comes down to at the risk of repeating myself, it comes down to the authenticity of your message and the authenticity of your mission and the sort of social benefit of what it is that you do as a business leader. What about your employees? What have been some of the challenges with regards to creating this environment where there is increased collaboration, decentralization of decision making, and so on? What have you had to do from a sort of mentorship, guidance angle to help effect that change with regards to your employees and other stakeholders?
And we've certainly had a big challenge addressing that. We're a tech startup, so half my employees are physicists. They're not the most outgoing or gregarious of people, and they're super happy in a laboratory, and if you leave them alone. We've had to really work with them to create an environment where they are both willing to be there and willing to communicate, but not pressured to be at the forefront, because many people aren't comfortable. It's hard for us as business leaders to remember no one else has had to adapt aggressively these kinds of skills for video calls, for communicating in all new methods. Our employees aren't necessarily doing the same thing we are. We need to create environments where they're comfortable. And that's been a big challenge for us with our physicists because they're not the most comfortable. One of the best things that we've done is done a team social. So we do a team social Zoom call every week now. It's at lunchtime, everybody logs on, we all eat our lunches together once a week. It just creates an environment that replicates a physical environment where we could all be at the table together. It lets the people who aren't very vocal sit a little to the back and participate as much as they want, and the people who like that social interaction to get it and to talk and to get that communication. It was a little nerve-wracking to do. It's a big change socially to ask everyone to jump on a call, but it was one of the best things we did. I strongly stand by anybody who's got a team out there. It's a great way to do it. So the other thing we've had to do a lot of is work with our employees on time management skills. Being outside of the workplace is a very, very different environment for our employees. And as business leaders, we're not as bound to that chair, to that environment. We're usually on the road. We're usually out at meetings. We're used to managing our time. It's not always the case for someone who you've taken from a very structured environment and put into a very unstructured environment that they can just adapt that skill set. You often need to help them and guide them through that, but also in a way that isn't overly micromanaging their day-to-day activities. So it's a delicate balance of providing the support that they need and pushing to find out what that support is, but not moving them even farther out of the comfort zone that they may have established now.
So it's about communicating a lot, but the right type of communication, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, you don't want them. It's easy to come across as an over communicator right now. And it's very easy for employees to interpret that as something is wrong with the core business. Because there is a lot wrong with many core businesses, and employees are right to be fearful right now. And no matter how much you comfort them, if you're handling that communication wrong, they're going to pick up on what they think is a subconscious signal that the ship is going under. And that's the last thing you want. It has to be very carefully managed so that your employees know they're safe, that this is adaptation and change that you're doing to advance and to protect their job. So deep communication and deep trust. We have developed a lot more trust and a lot more communication since COVID, I think.
Mm-hmm. And alignment as well, I suppose, is important, because you talked a little bit about alignment externally with your mission when you're making decisions about clients, about partners, about suppliers. The one thing we didn't touch on was values, and I suppose perhaps I can ask you a question about that in terms of your company values, how you've seen them become more prevalent and important with regards to maintaining that engagement, both internally and externally. How have you seen the last couple of months in that regard?
Yeah, and we've actually seen some significant change on how much cohesion that's pulled from our team. But before, I was talking a lot about the mission externally. Now, because we're meeting on the same kind of calls, we're having the same kind of dialogue, we're talking a lot more about everything that's happening because we've got wider open communication channels. They're starting to be pummeled with the mission too. And suddenly it's gone from something I used to say to them once a month or something to something they're hearing twice a week. Mission to protect water. This is what we're doing. This is why these guys signed on. You don't sign up to a startup because you like insecurity in your job and you like not, your mission and your objectives changing every week. You sign up because you want to do something amazing. And hearing that message over and over, reinforcing that message, has helped them get on board with the changes that are happening and help them feel like they're in the right place. Because the other thing is there's the opportunity for people right now in the job market. Not for everyone, but your superstars are probably being hunted. So you really want them to know that they can stay with you for more than just what you're doing, but because you're on a mission together.
Shared values. Shared values create shared bonds.
Exactly. Yeah. And with a company like ours that is very mission driven, that's essential. If they're not on board with the mission, then, as a management team, we've made the decision that the vision and the mission is what's going to guide us through our business choices. And if the employees don't feel that as well, they'll never understand why we're doing what we're doing.
And it sounds as if it can become a framework, again, for larger established businesses to make decisions externally, but also internally with regards to, who those employees are that are incredibly engaged towards, the mission and vision of the business. Is there anything?
Sorry, that's something for a given at a startup, because, when you're bringing someone on to a startup that may run out of money and go under, like that is the reality of startups until you're well established in the market, and even thereafter there is risk. So for us, it's always been a core part of the interview process and the mandate to explain that if you're not on this mission, then you shouldn't be taking the risk. And sharing that mission has allowed us to gather a core crew of people who are very, very inspired about what they do. I hope that that's an employment practice that we never discontinue.
And from experience, it's definitely not an employment practice that exists in all or even a lot of more established businesses. So Anthea, time flies. We're already at the end of the first part of the session. Thank you. Thank you for sharing some of your insights in terms of what's going on right now. And I know that the attendees will have got great takeaways with regards to how they can maybe take some of these things and apply them in their own businesses. So thank you. I'm going to pass the microphone now to our Vice President of Corporate Connections Canada, Trevor Botkin. I've seen some good engagement in the chat bar and in the Q&A, and I'll give him about 15 minutes to run through the question and answer session. So if you do have any questions for Anthea, please feel free to put them into the Q&A or the chat bar. Trevor, over to you, and thank you once again, Anthea.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Anthea, for this morning so far. We can just dive right in and ask the questions that we already have in the chat bar and the Q&A, and we'll start with Stephen in terms of talking about the relative technology of 2S. Does your technology have the capability of either extracting those trace metals that are showing up in there, or signifying if there's actual value in there, and maybe companies flushing value out through the back door and not realizing it?
Actually, that's going to be our first application. We're being installed in a lithium extraction facility. So they're taking water with lithium in it and running it through their facility. We're going to let them know how much of that incredibly valuable lithium is going out the pipe at the back end, so that they can refine their process and make sure that they properly extract that brine. That's something we're quite excited about, because they're implementing a technology that's not only helping enable battery technology, which reduces emissions, but also the lithium industry itself is going through an environmental renaissance right now. So it's great to be helping a company increase revenue while double hitting our mission.
And in terms of the development, are there gaps that you've identified in either the business model or the technology that you've been able to bridge or be more successful? I mean, outside of the obvious one, which is raising money.
Yeah, so we have actually, gaps in our business model. I'm just reading over the question here.
Yeah, so just in terms of, are there any gaps or in the technology where you said, whoa, because obviously when we're launching a startup, there's a lot of assumptions. We make educated guesses on where we think the model is, or how we monetize, or what our ideal customers. And you mentioned a little bit the oil and gas industry earlier, and when that was completely devastated at the beginning of COVID, through everyone stopped driving their cars, and oil production continued in other parts of the world, just crashing the value of oil. So, and I think he's just really wanting to understand, were there any gaps that you identified, and then how did you bridge those gaps if they were found?
Yeah, actually, we've had to be pretty adaptive on that front, because our clients have very, very different needs based on what market they're in. So, for our business model, we actually sell our sensor either directly to industry who want to have deep control of the hardware, or when you're talking to a municipality, they don't have any capital budget, and they're not going to have any capital budget for the foreseeable future, because no one's paying their property taxes anymore. And that's so there we rent it to them. We sell it sensor as a service, so that they can actually use it to reduce their operational costs and continue through. As for assumptions we've made, I mean, when we started this, we had this image of this fully complete sensor with all these features and everything. And as we've gone along, we've actually stripped that down. Every step that we go through, we're asking, is this feature really necessary, and why? Because we think it is, or because the client thinks it is? And if the answer isn't, we've had a client ask for it, it's gone. Like, we'll wait until they do, and then we can build it out. But getting this unit down to its most base form has been an important part of agility and moving quickly.
You talked there briefly about municipalities, and I'm just wondering how much of the business model or the go-to-market strategy would involve helping communities, helping governments change their policies of saying, before they said, well, we can't mandate that they have real-time reporting or real-time monitoring of their water, because there doesn't exist a method of doing that. It's cost prohibitive. But if you can say, look, we have a system that we can help them real-time monitor, now's the time to change our policies. Now's the time to insist that companies are held accountable in real time, not 6 months, not a year down the road after the damage has been done. So how much of the go-to-market strategy would be helping governments reshape that policy, or doing policy reform towards some of these environmental challenges?
So that's something that we're really adapting on. That has always been the plan, to ask them to change the policy. When we started this endeavor, they told us that would be a 10-year process. I don't think it's going to be a 10-year process anymore. There's a willingness to change that we haven't seen, and a willingness to hold companies accountable. And what was surprising to me going into the market was the willingness of companies and the excitement that I'm getting from companies on fulfilling those mandates. That I think there's willingness on both sides to change the regulations to be more stringent, which is something that made me very proud of Canadian industry when I found it.
Beautiful. And we've talked a lot about the purpose or mission of 2S, but in terms of from a business standpoint, what do you see the long-term vision in terms of, and Daryl's asking about, stay private, be acquired, possibly go public, kind of what's that roadmap look like when you sit down with the other owners?
So there are a few options of where we can go. I think it is very clear that the mission is to build a company that's big enough that I shouldn't be managing it in 5 years. So I developed this great little skill set of taking something from 0 to 10, from nothing existing to a product. And that's a great skill set. I do not also want to develop the skill set of taking something from 100 to 1 million. So we want to make it big enough, we can have a positive enough effect on the world that this should be an extremely large company 5 years from now. Now, will that be an exit? Maybe, because there are a lot of people who work very well in the sensor industry and could maybe do a better job of this than us. Or maybe it will be we hire a really great international manager who understands how to grow something huge and amazing. So couple options, but we know that the vision is to be something amazing.
Beautiful. And with so many of your team workers working in with other roles or gigs in terms of that flexibility, did you find that there was any risks relative to performance or the communication, the culture, either before or currently, or do you see any risks or challenges coming up as a result of this agile or fluid sort of many people kind of pitching in?
I think it's becoming part of our core culture in a way that we always wanted, but was difficult to promote before we became very, very active about it. And very, very intentional. Because we have always had a vision of a decentralized company. We have markets worldwide. Like a lot of our mining market will be in South America. A lot of the oil and gas will be in the United States and in the Middle East. So having that decentralized format was always the plan, but actually putting the intention into getting small group communication has been absolutely vital.
And I'm assuming that some of the risk then perhaps is in terms of creating a culture also of accountability, of saying, if this is our mission, this is the vision, and accountability, as opposed to a more centralized company where there's a reporting process and people are held accountable. It sounds more like you're having to shift some of the ways you look at accountability.
Absolutely, because for two reasons. One is that this is a risky endeavor and I cannot be holding everybody accountable whose work it was necessarily, because the tasks and the goals that we set might not be accomplishable. We know this. That's life in a startup. But also because we want to have a willingness to communicate and a willingness to bring problems forward. And if people feel like the consequence of pointing out an error is that they will be held personally accountable for it, then that's a problem. So we want to create that safe environment, which means if something goes wrong, it's the whole team's fault. It's everybody's fault, and we deal with it. And that's been working very well for us so far. We'll see as we get larger, that's going to be more and more difficult to manage and to maintain. But the hope is that we can maintain that mentality.
But I think it would also come down to then really establishing how new hires are brought on, and in terms of their onboarding, or even how they're filtered before they're hired, to make sure that they're going to fit in with that culture of shared accountability, of the vision of that, and they're not there just to collect a paycheck.
I agree. We view that as a big risk going forward, because many startups like us scale quickly, and that can be one of the key parts that's lost in a large scale up, is suddenly you're trying to get anyone you can get because you need people now. And suddenly I'm too busy to be at the interviews, so the person who's doing it doesn't share our core values and doesn't get them across at the table. It's, in my perspective, when we hit the scaling stage, that is one of our biggest risk points, is maintaining the culture and building a proper hiring process. And that's actually one place where my confederates at CC1 Edmonton have been incredibly helpful, because a lot of them have a lot of hiring experience. They have a lot of experience building out that format. You know, they've had the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So I'm going to learn from them and hopefully do it right.
And what about the naysayers? What about the people who possibly have a vested interest in not having this much oversight, or having somebody looking over their shoulder, because their profits sometimes lie in getting away with environmental acts of sloppy output from their factories? What about those people who would say, no, we don't need this. This is not what our industry needs, and this is just a gimmick in terms of what they're doing and trying to shut you down?
I have been surprised at how little of that we have found in the market. I was absolutely expecting it. I have been asked that question other times by other people as well. It's a general impression that we have that industry would rather save a dime than protect something. And that is not what we're finding out there. Now, that is possible that the companies who have no interest in it won't answer my calls either, but there are many, many people willing to talk to us. I've never had anyone say they weren't interested in doing a better job protecting the environment and doing a better job with their emissions. And that has been both surprising and very rewarding.
So are you working with lobbyists or current organizations that would help you, kind of address some of these things at different levels of the government?
It's on our radar to start doing that. I see, Steve, you asked that question. So if you have insight on how to do that process, that's something we're looking at in the future here. Once we get something into market, right now we are running as lean as possible. So things like that, unfortunately, don't make it into the budget, but it absolutely is a future path that we have to take. So
that's great. And in terms of, because I don't have any more questions that are in here, but I think, a lot of the things that you talked about with David that came up was what I see as a leader is being willing to be vulnerable in front of your team and say, I may not have all the answers, but we're going to hold to the vision, and we're going to hold to our integrity as a company. And that's going to be the guiding star, the North Star that we're going to always measure our performance against, as opposed to the dollars and cents or the production budgets, or the output is saying, are we closer to our goal or are we further away? And I think that takes vulnerability as a leader, and showing that you're human too. And that's something I heard a lot. I didn't hear the word come up, but it sounds a lot like it's something that you're embracing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a vital part of how we should be leading going into the future, with honesty and vulnerability. And I think that the changes that we've seen with the COVID environment very much lead into that. We're seeing a lot more humanity out of people. I've seen David's kids walk into his meetings. He's seen mine walk into our meetings. Like, we're showing a side of ourselves that we haven't before. And it's no longer taboo like it used to be. And we need to embrace that and encourage that, because having that ability to share who we are as people, not just who we are as business people, is how we can create lasting bonds and strong partnerships and great employee relations. So absolutely.
So I think I have time for the last one. I'll grab David's one in just in terms of the biggest obstacle, or what's the one thing that's keeping you up at night as you look at your rollout, your commercialization, your go-to-market. What's the one thing that you're most worried about?
My biggest concern on the client side is the sales cycle time. So we don't actually know how long it's going to take these companies to install a sensor and cut us a check. We're getting really positive response from clients, but sales cycle could have a massive, massive difference on our cash flow for the upcoming year. So that's one that keeps me awake at night. My biggest issue right now is I spend all day calling clients who get pretty excited about what we can do. And then I have to end the conversation with, we're not quite ready yet. Could you wait, please? So that's my biggest frustration right now is I wish I could push my team faster. And I feel like we're going as fast as we can. We got probably delayed 2 months by COVID because our lab was shut down and there was nothing we could do. So now we're playing a big game of catch up to get into the fields. My biggest frustration is selling something I don't have yet.
Definitely understand that. So look, that's it for my time with you. I'm going to turn it back to David. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone on the call today for your great questions. So David?
Thanks, Trevor. And yeah, I think it's very inspirational what you're doing, Anthea, and not only what you're doing, but how you're doing it. And I love the authenticity in terms of what you've been sharing with us over the last 45 minutes. So thank you. We are at the end of today's session, unfortunately. So I'd just like to remind everybody that we will be sharing a recording of this on the Corporate Connections Canada YouTube channel. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do go and visit Corporate Connections Canada YouTube, where you'll be able to find all of the speaker series recordings and other nuggets of information that we hope is valuable to you. Anthea Sargeaunt, thank you once again for your time today. True pleasure to speak to you. And
it's been a pleasure to share about our company and what we're doing.
Absolutely, and the pleasure is shared. In a couple of weeks, we're actually going to be taking a break next week. In 2 weeks, on June 26th, we'll have the pleasure of staying out west. We will be having Laurie Power, who is the president of NP Benefits, group benefits company based out of Edmonton, Alberta, who will be our next speaker. That's June 26th, 11 a.m. And to wrap up, as always, I'd just like to wish everybody that's been on the call today a wonderful day. Thank you for all of your comments, your insight, your engagement with Anthea, and wishing you all collectively a fantastic Friday and a great weekend, everybody. Thank you very much.